On July 3, 2026, an Indian film titled Satluj appeared on a major streaming service. 48 hours later, every digital trace of it was gone. No explanation, no countdown, just a black screen where a story used to be. At that same moment, a different story was being forced onto every screen in Iran. A 6-day, 5-city funeral procession for Ayatollah Khamenei, parading his casket before millions in a carefully choreographed display of national mourning. A corpse cannot tell its own story. It has no voice to correct the record, which makes it a powerful tool for any government looking to write its own history. States manage these stories through two opposing strategies. They can make the dead impossible to ignore, or they can make them impossible to find. The consequences of these choices are visible in the wreckage. In Iran, a funeral coincided with 80 American airstrikes in a single night. In India, the suppression of a film hides the fate of 25,000 people who vanished without a trial. Whether a regime is mandating a week of public grief or scrubbing a movie from the internet, the goal remains the same. They are deciding who was allowed to be remembered and who must be forgotten. Ayatollah Khamenei died in February, yet his body sat in a secure vault for 4 months. The state waited until July to suddenly move his casket into the streets. This wasn't a delay in logistics, it was a choice in timing. The funeral began the exact week a major ceasefire agreement with the United States fell apart. The government took the casket across the border into Najaf, Iraq, a city that sits at the heart of the Shia world. This is the same country Iran fought in an 8-year war that claimed 1 million lives. By parading their leader through the streets of Najaf, the Iranian government was signaling its authority over the region's most sacred religious sites, effectively claiming the legacy of the faith for their own regime. The visual cues were unmistakable. The casket was draped in red, and the streets were filled with red flags, symbols that, in this tradition, signify a demand for blood vengeance that remains active until the enemy is defeated. As the procession moved, so did the military. Within hours of the casket crossing the border, Iranian forces attacked commercial tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, testing whether the U.S. could actually protect the world's primary oil routes. The American response was a barrage of 80 airstrikes hitting Iranian ports and oil hubs, timed almost perfectly with the televised images of millions of mourners hitting their chests in grief. But the loudest part of the funeral was what it hid. While the cameras focused on the crowds, the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, was nowhere to be found. He hasn't been seen in public for 4 months, leaving generals to run the country while the public focused on the casket. The state broadcasted the funeral to the world, using the imagery of a martyr to mask a leadership in hiding, and a nation at the brink of a larger war. While one state uses the dead to project power, another uses silence to hide it. What happens when the state is the reason the bodies are missing in the first place? In 1995, Punjab was a landscape of fear. Under the command of leaders like DGP KPS Gill, the police were given total authority to end an insurgency. In the process, 25,000 people were picked up from their homes and simply disappeared. Jaswant Singh Kalra wasn't a politician, he was a bank clerk. When his neighbors began vanishing, he realized that if he couldn't find the people, he might be able to find the paper trail they left behind. Kalra investigated the municipal records for firewood. He calculated exactly how much wood is required to cremate a single human body, then compared that to the massive tonnage of firewood the police were ordering for local cremation grounds. He matched his firewood math against the official registers. He found thousands of entries for unclaimed bodies brought in by the police, people whose families were, at that very moment, still waiting for them to come home. The data proved that the police were executing citizens, labeling them as unidentified militants to claim government bounties, and disposing of the evidence in the Satluj River. When Kalra went public with his findings, the system turned on him. In September 1995, he was abducted from his own driveway in broad daylight. The man who documented the disappearance of 25,000 people was murdered and disappeared using the exact same methods he had spent years exposing. In Tehran, the government uses a body to justify its future. In Punjab, the authorities erased a body to protect their past. This isn't just a matter of history. The film Satluj was pulled from the internet in 2026 because the story of a bank clerk from 1995 still makes the state uncomfortable. Before it was banned, the movie faced 120 mandated cuts and 3 name changes. The authorities tried to edit the story into something harmless before finally deciding to delete it altogether. Decades after Halra was killed, the effort to scrap his work continues. The state that took his life is now attempting to remove the digital memory of his investigation. In Tehran, the state demands that its citizens look at a casket to validate a military regime. In India, the state demands that its citizens look away from a film to protect the reputation of its police force. Jaswant Singh Kalra famously said, "I challenge the darkness. I will light a lamp." When a government tries to manage what you see, or what you aren't allowed to find, the only response is to keep looking